The CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, is stepping down. And Apple saying goodbye to him is Apple saying goodbye to the world it dominated for so long. I want to look at the big challenges that are facing the next CEO because they forecast something existential about challenges that are going to be facing all companies going forward. I'm Jake Ward. This is The Rip Current. We look at the big invisible forces shaping our lives. And if you want to see the full written analysis of this story, the problems that Cook is facing and all of the bigger issues that companies have faced historically when in the position like they are, go to theripcurrent.com where paid subscribers can see all of that. I want to start here with talking about a company that has been dominant for generations, one so powerful it has been unimaginable to think it would ever go away, and yet it did. This is a photograph of some of the employees of that company. There's a gathering in 1925 of an enormous number of employees. Look at this. It is, for those of you who are listening rather than watching, I'm showing a photograph here that shows thousands of people in suit and tie gathered in an enormous hall at a corporate gathering at Christmas 1925. These are employees of the Stetson Corporation. The Stetson Corporation was an absolute monolith of American capitalism, one that dominated the culture and the market for a long, long time. Founded in 1865 in Philadelphia, by the early 1900s, it was the largest hat factory in the world. It had a 1.4 million square foot manufacturing facility employing over 5,000 people. And by 1915, 5,400 employees were turning out 3.3 million hats a year. It had operations on multiple continents at a time that predated flight. And the thing was, it was the kind of thing that was such a watchword of like any gentleman who stepped outside was going to wear a hat. And Stetson was the hat you wanted to be wearing. That brand name was synonymous with being a civilized human being. The kill shot here was not competition. It was a cultural shift that the company did not see coming. And that was when newly elected President John F. Kennedy first spoke to the nation without a hat on in 1960. It signaled to people, hey, maybe cool people don't wear hats anymore. Between 1947 and 1968, revenues dropped from about $29 million to about $8 million. The Philadelphia factory closed in 1971, and the company went bankrupt in 1986. Today, you can buy a Stetson hat, but it's not made by that company. It's made by somebody else who has licensed the name. And when I look at there's some wonderful photos, these architectural photos of the main New York City showroom. It was just the height of luxury. I'm showing a photograph here that shows the main entrance where these glass doors open to this little lobby and you go in to meet with the company, see the latest design. I mean, this was the absolute cutting edge of what was considered, civilized and cool in that part of, in that time in American history. And to me, it is such a useful thing for thinking about the challenges facing Apple as it prepares to say goodbye to Tim Cook. Here's Tim Cook speaking at the China Development Forum in 2026. And China, I want to talk about here because China is really core to his legacy and what he was so good at. So what Tim Cook was great at was logistics. Steve Jobs was an ideas guy, but Cook came in as a logistics guy. And what he did was pioneered a supply chain that helped to make Apple the most successful company in the history of companies. What he did so well was create, first of all, a relationship with China that enabled him to basically get from his manufacturers a product that he could sell at an incredible markup. And that markup was, brought just incredible amounts of money into this company. So the pillar of his legacy is the incredible finances that China made possible. In fiscal year of 2025, Apple reported revenue of $416.16 billion. And that was driven in part by the strong iPhone 17 reception and a 13.5% surge in services. I want to talk about that in a second. But net income hit $112 billion with gross margins reaching, check this out, a record 46.9%. When you are making 46% revenues, right, that for every dollar you spend, for every dollar you earn, you get to keep 46 cents of that. That is an incredible profit margin. And during Cook's tenure, Apple grew its market cap from like $350 billion to about $4 trillion. That's a 1,000% increase in market cap. The yearly revenue quadrupled from $108 billion to $416 billion. So that is the thing that he made possible through his relationship with China, where he got Foxconn and these other manufacturers in China to give him a product that was extremely fancy, that people would pay big money for, but that didn't cost him very much to make. And the open Obama era kind of, geopolitical world in which open borders and free trade made that possible, that was an incredible boon to the company. Then the second pillar of his legacy was the App Store, something that Steve Jobs had created, but he really got locked in. So for the first time this year, services have overtaken the iPhone as the largest contributor to gross profit. It accounts for about 42% of profit versus 41% from the iPhones. And so the reason that they make so much money off of that is because anything that you buy on the App Store, Apple gets a 15 to 30% cut of that. It's an incredible way of making money. And so these things conspired to make Apple the most profitable company in American history right now. And of course, all of that was built on just how sexy it was to have the phone. The phone is a revolutionary thing. And because everyone wanted it, that's what brings them into the fountain of money that is the App Store and gives Tim Cook such incredible credit for having created this way of getting this product into your hands at a price that it could afford at a wholesale level while you pay out the nose for this incredibly high value phone. So, China, the App Store, how sexy the phone is. Those were his three pillars. Let's talk about why all of those are suddenly in question. The first, of course, is China. China is no longer our friendly trade partner. It is a trade adversary. It's always been a little adversarial, but now it is truly a trade adversary. And, first of all, the Trump administration imposing tariffs means that Apple has paid about $3 billion in tariffs. And so that's already a problem. And China's not content to let the iPhone be the dominant phone there, right? Its market share in China has fallen as Xiaomi and Huawei and Honor these companies are stepping in to duke it out with Apple when it comes to high-end phones. So the relationship with China is changing. This is part of why Apple has been moving to try and produce phones in places like India, Vietnam. They're trying to diversify because China is no longer going to be this incredible, engine of high profit, high margin manufacturing any longer. The second problem, and this is the really big problem, is the rise of AI. Agentic AI is a enormous and existential threat to the whole app idea, right? So, there's this whole notion, right? If you think about like how you were going to go like meet friends for a picnic, let's say you were going to meet somebody out in the world, right? You're going to use a variety of apps, according to Apple's model, to do that. You're going to look up at the weather and you're going to look at who else might be meeting there. You're going to check Meetup to make sure there's nobody else is going to overrun the park. And you're going to maybe use the app that shows you where the sun's going to be at a certain time to figure out where you're going to put your picnic blanket. And, all of these things are dependent on the App Store. And any purchase you make in the App Store, Apple gets a cut of, right? So it's this incredible way of making money. With agentic AI that can go out into the world and do things for you, that can anticipate your needs, you don't need any of those anymore, right? In theory, agentic AI can go out and figure all that stuff out for you, get the Uber to your door, get the food to your destination. All of that stuff can be taken care of without Apple getting any money out of it at all. That's a huge problem. Then the third thing, the sexy iPhone, that's also under threat because now everybody and their mother is trying to come up with the next form factor for an AI future. And maybe that's going to be made by OpenAI, right? So Johnny Ive, who designed the iMac, he was a chief designer at Apple. He is now working for Sam Altman. He's been acquired by Sam Altman. His design firm here in San Francisco is working on whatever the next form factor is going to be for an AI-driven piece of hardware. Meta has these glasses it's experimenting with and various other form factors that it's been trying to play with. You've got companies putting together weird little pins that you can use. Google has Gemini built into its phone. Like, they're all incorporating AI into hardware and trying to figure out what that hardware is going to look like. The iPhone as a form factor is 20 years old, and it's built around the app idea. It's not built around AI. The other big embarrassment for AI, for the company so far, has been Siri. Because in the age when you and I are beginning to use AI for everything, Siri is just kind of like, it's just not useful. It's like a sort of simulation of AI. And I would argue that AI is a simulation of all kinds of things, but Siri is really just like not delivering anything. Now, Apple's strategy has been, we're going to use our brand loyalty around privacy as our distinguishing characteristic. And we're going to basically create an on-device piece of AI, a piece of AI that will read your behavior and your data off of your phone, but not everybody else's phone, as opposed to the Anthropics and the OpenAIs of the world, which are using the world's information to try and come up with patterns and figure out how to, and make an LLM really a convincing, personal assistant based on that. Apple's talking about just using your data, but that's really slow. It's not been going very well. It's just been moving at a really glacial pace. And so that's a real problem that needs to be solved by this company for them to survive in a world of these incredibly slick LLMs. So who's the guy who's going to try and solve all of this? It's a guy named John Ternus. He's about 15 years younger than Cook, and he's worked at Apple for about half of his life. He got there 4 years after he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a mechanical engineering degree. And whereas Jobs was this sort of product visionary and Cook is this supply chain genius, Ternus is an engineer. He is someone who has basically worked on the gradual improvements to the gadgets. He makes sure they get developed, and he makes sure that they work better and better. He's been in charge of hardware since 2021. He's a highly technical guy. Supposedly he gets really into the nerdery of the meetings. He's not a product development kind of strategist. He gets in there. And he's been focused on improving quality and sort of functional improvements, the battery life and the performance and the connectivity, right? But he's also been criticized for not doing as much as previous hardware chiefs have to implement something cool and new, a real breakthrough technology. We haven't really seen that from Apple. Now, the friendlier read on Ternus is that an engineer running Apple in an AI moment could be exactly the right thing, because he might be the guy, for instance, to fix Siri, right? The criticism of Apple's AI has not been that the ideas are bad. It's just that they're really slow. The execution has just been glacial. And so perhaps he's the guy who could sweat the details and fix that faster than a strategist ever could. And, there's something about that is compelling, I'm sure, to the board. Excuse me. Pardon me. But here's the thing. Ternus has never run a company. He's never run a budget this big. He's never done anything at this scale. He's touched every product that's come out of Apple in 25 years. And so the argument for him is that Apple's problem right now is not strategy, it's execution. He's an execution guy, but this is a bet, and it's not by any means a sure bet. So the thing I would say here is that, Tim Cook turned Apple into the most profitable company on earth by mastering the world as it was. And now the world has changed, and Apple needs somebody who can build for the world as it is going to be. The last thought I'll sort of leave you with here is that, and again, you can go to the ripcurrent.com, and paid subscribers can see all of this stuff and read a deeper analysis of this. But when you look back across companies that were at one point dominant, like the Stetson Corporation, right? I mean, the Stetson Corporation did not lose to a better hat. The world stopped wearing hats, right? The culture moved. It's not that they were bad at making hats, it's that they couldn't convince people to wear hats any longer, right? That reminds me of Apple's situation with the iPhone, right? If people stop using iPhones, it's not because iPhones aren't great. It's because they're going to have moved on to something else, and Apple won't have come up with that, whatever that thing is going to be. So, here's the thing, the stat I would throw at you. Of the companies on the Fortune 500 list in 1955, okay, only 52 of them remained on the list in 2021, right? So that means 88% had gone bankrupt or been acquired or just fallen off in some way, right? The average tenure of a company on the S&P 500 was 33 years in 1964. 33 years, that's it. The thing is, it keeps getting shorter, that lifespan. It had narrowed to 24 years by 2016, and it is forecast to shrink to just 12 years by 2027, right? So the average lifespan of a U.S. S&P 500 company used to be 67 years, and now it is 15 years. So that means that at the current churn rate, about half of S&P 500 companies will be replaced over the next 10 years. So for anyone who looks at these companies and says, this company has mastered the universe, it has earned its place in the Valhalla of business, it is here forever, I would just point you again at the Stetson Corporation and the assumption that hats would be worn forever. I would point you at Kodak and the assumption that we would always be developing our films at these little booths set next to the major markets of the world. I would point you at car companies. I would point you at mainframe manufacturers. I would point you at airlines. There is nothing that says that these companies have to survive. And in a world where our entire way of accessing and deciding what to do with information is going to be transformed as it is right now, nothing is a given. Everything is up for grabs, and the world that Tim Cook mastered no longer exists. The Rip Current is produced and created by me, Jacob Ward. And if you liked this show and you want more content like this, go to theripcurrent.com, where I publish a weekly newsletter that covers these same sorts of stories of the big invisible forces that have us all in their grip. And if you want to really do me a favor, if you could go to where you have listened to this or watched it and like it, share it, or even better, review it. Holy cow, is that helpful? It's the best possible way for me to find a new audience. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening.